Hello, and welcome to the Art of Intuition podcast. I'm Susan Jane, and I'm your host for this episode. Now, have you ever met someone who seemed kind, like they said all the right things, and yet something inside of you still held back? You know, that quiet hesitation, that little whisper of, don't get too close. Instead of being cold or broken, it's not about that. It's about trust. It's not that you're cold, you're broken. It's about trust. Okay. In this episode, we're exploring why trusting others can feel so difficult, even when everything on the surface looks safe. We'll talk about the role of emotional intuition plays in protecting us and how past hurts can keep us on high alert. And most importantly, gentle ways that you can begin to rebuild that trust. So, if you've ever wondered why you've hesitated to open up or how to feel safe connecting with others again, this episode's for you. So, let's get started. Now, again, this episode is about emotional intuitive nature. And if you're not sure what your strongest intuitive nature is, do the quiz. It's on the website intuitivenature.com.au. It's an Australian business. And you will be able to work out where your strongest intuitive nature is. Now, we have access to all four of the intuitive natures, so the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. But sometimes, in certain times of our life, in certain aspects, particular ones come forward stronger. I know through my time period, the physical intuition started off quite strongly, then the emotional and mental, and then spiritual is right across the board. So understanding where your strongest part is helps you to get through it a little bit more, or to give you an understanding of those messages. Now, when meeting someone for the first time, do you smile and nod and say, I'm fine? But deep inside, there's that voice that whispers, don't get too close. When Even when there's someone kind, even when they're saying all the right things, but you still find yourself second guessing. You know, you're watching, you're waiting for a catch. I know I do that. So this is you. You're not cold or broken, like I said before. You're not too much. It's that you are intuitive and you've been hurt before, and your heart is doing its best to protect you. So the hidden truth about emotional trust, it isn't about the logic, it's about the felt experience. And if you've been let down, dismissed, betrayed, gaslit, mine was gaslit in the past, your emotional intuition learns how to stay on high alert. So people with emotional intuition are natural feelers and connectors. You're the connectors of the bunch, and it's how we're feeling. We'll often refer to it. Oh, I feel this, and it's that understanding of that feeling side of it. Um, but that same gift can often become a wound when the trust has been broken. So if you've gone through a relationship where the trust was broken, that is something that you're going to hold on to for a while until you get an understanding of that feeling. You may hold back from sharing your true feelings. That's me. Become overly accommodating to keep peace. I've learned not to do that. Find yourself trying to read the room instead of relaxing into it. Now, when I was younger, I used to be able to feel, I would come out of school, I was in primary school, I could feel how my mum was at home. I could feel her emotions from at home. Now, I didn't understand it being only young. I didn't understand what your periods were or anything like that. But I would say, "Oh, mum's grumpy." I could feel that she was grumpy. That was my terminology. And yes, guaranteed she would have had a period, and so she was on edge. So I could feel that. I could walk into a room, and I could say, "They're feeling this way. They're feeling this way. They're feeling that way. They're feeling that way," which was fine. That's great, intuitive information coming through. But where the empath comes in and where we get stuck is we take on those emotions and then we actually work with work or change to suit. So when you find yourself trying to read the room, when you're reading the room, which is fine, but when you start to change your behavior or start to change your patterning to match the others, that's when it's wrong. That's when you need to instead relax into it and say, well, if they're in a grumpy mood, that's fine. That's them, not me. So here's the thing, you don't need to fix your ability to connect. You're connecting. You need to heal your ability to discern who's safe to connect with. So when somebody's in the a negative mindset or is in the wrong frame of mind, you can still learn to trust that person, but trust them to a certain area and allow the rest to go. So, three ways to gently rebuild your emotional trust in others are: you look for patterns, not promises. You use your emotional check in tool, which we're going to go through, and you give yourself permission to pause. Okay, these are the three that we're looking at. So, looking for patterns, not promises. Words can be confronting. So, people can promise. But trusting isn't about building on what people say, it's about building on what they consistently do. Now, we're experiencing this at the moment. My partner's son has been on drugs for quite a few years now. And we've had all the promises. I'm getting better. I'm doing this. I'm doing this. You know, can I just borrow some money? I'm just doing this. I'm doing that. And I have been trying to tell or explain to my partner that these are patterns. We can see that he's been there, he's done that, he's made those promises. They're just words, they're words to emotionally manipulate you, and that's why this trust happens. I said, so it's the patterns that we're looking for. Okay, so he has said this before, he has done that, and then things are all twisted around again. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking for those patterns. If somebody does something wrong by you, um, and like domestic violence is one of these really strong areas. So when we're looking for patterns and not promises, it's being mindful of the words and what they're saying. So in my situation, I wasn't. I was constantly promised something better. And it wasn't until I started to look back and I started to see those patterns, as soon as he went off the rails, this is how he behaved to me. If something didn't work for him, I would cop it. If something didn't work for him, I would cop it. And I started to look for those patterns. And there was a book I read called The Dance of Anger. I think it was, and I do apologize, I can't remember the name of the author, but it was like The Dance of Anger. And it's about how we as in a couple, how you dance around situations. And as a man, he was the lead, and in dancing, especially ballroom dancing, the man's the lead. He leads you around, and that's what was happening to me. So my ex would come home, say from the pub, he'd come home, he'd be angry about something there, and he would find something wrong in the home. This particular time, I'd learnt how to do this dance with anger. This particular time, he went, there's dust on the microwave, and he was ropeable, the dust on the microwave. So I thought, I remembered this book, and I went and wiped the dust off the microwave. Not that there was a lot, but there was a bit of dust on the microwave. I had three kids in 3 years, mind you, in this time. So I was pretty busy. Wiped the dust off the microwave, and he just kept on going on and on and on. And I said to him, "What are you arguing about? There's no dust on there anymore. It's gone." "Oh yeah, but you can't keep the house clean." I said, "Well, got three kids, but there's no dust on the microwave." And then he would take me on another dance. "Oh yeah, but you don't know how to look after children." I said, "No, we're not fighting about that. We're fighting about dust on the microwave, and there's no dust there, so we can stop fighting." And this is this dance. So he would take me again. "Oh yeah, but you didn't do this." And it's like, we're not arguing about that. We're arguing about dust on the microwave. And I kept on bringing it back to the argument, which was no longer there. And this was how he used to um, make these promises, make these words, make these comments. And I could then really see the patterning in what was going on. So these are the sort of things that you can look at the patterns rather than promises. And some of the patterns are, especially again in the domestic violence, where you hear about a man hitting a woman and then promising her the world and giving her things and trying to make up for what he has done. And so you accept that, and then you move on again until he hits again, and then he makes all those promises. "Oh, I promise I'll never do it. I'm rah rah." And it's those patterns that we need to look at in that way. So look for the patterns, not the promises. It's not the words, it's what they're actually doing. So try this. Start noticing the patterns over time rather than getting swept up in the first impressions. Remember, go back, reflect. Does this person follow through? Do they respect your emotional boundaries? Do they make space for your feelings, not just tolerate them? Another example is a woman I once supported kept getting swept up by the emotional charming friends who later dismissed her needs. Once she began looking for the patterns instead of the potential, she started to attract people who felt safe and stayed safe. So when I'm looking at that, so this lady was after all these friends because she could see potential in them. I'll be their friend. Especially this was in business. I'll be their friend because they can help me in my business. But they didn't care. They just wanted her money. So she started to look at the patterns. And each time she'd gone into this course or gone into this training or gone into this or gone into that, she'd paid the money. And that's okay to pay money for a course, but you pay according to what you're getting back. Now, she was paying big money, but getting back very, very little. So she started to look at those patterns, and what she was seeing was the potentials, the promises they were saying, those potentials. It's like, oh, I'll promise you I'll get so many clients, and I'll promise you I'll do this, and I'll promise. But the reality was that's not what it was about. So she started to see that and then started to attract people or started to see business coaches that made her feel safe, that worked with her. And that was where she needed to be. Now, why it works is emotional trust is built on quiet consistency of actions, not the volume of affection. That just swamps you. So when they're using emotional manipulation to get where they want, then it's not right. So it's up to us to understand who we can trust and look at those patterns and look at where we're going with them. Number two is use the emotional check in tool. Now, people with emotional intuition will often feel everything and everyone. Like I said, I'd walk into a room and I could feel what was going on. I had to learn to not close it down, but not to take it on board. Now, this can be hard to know whether you're feeling your own emotions or absorbing someone else's. And this is what happens with empaths and our emotional intuition. Because we're feeling that those emotions, we're not sure if they're ours or not, and it can be quite challenging to get the difference. So try this before and after spending time with someone. Pause and ask, how do I feel in my body right now? Do I feel anxious? Do I feel heavy? Do I drained? Or more grounded and more open? Did I speak my truth or stay silent? Now, one example I had just recently, we had the electrician over and he was doing some sockets and PowerPoints and stuff like that. Now, this gentleman is a friend of my partner, so I have to be mindful of that. But I find him very, very negative and very, very draining for me. Now, he says he's one of the most positive people he knows because he always looks at the positive things. But all I hear is negative stuff coming out of his mouth. That's all I hear. And when it's negative, it's really quite, you know, everybody's an idiot. Everybody's, a cockhead, whatever he says, it's just it's constant. And it really, really starts to get to me, especially when he starts to talk about my partner in a derogatory way. So I take it on board. Now, he was here for the day, and I think I talked about it in one of the other podcasts. I did my best to try and protect myself and, check on how I was feeling and everything else. But him being here for the day was really quite exhausting. At the end of the day, I was in tears. Like he'd gone, well and truly gone. But I felt so anxious and so heavy and so drained that it was one of those sort of situations where I don't like being around him. Now, he's a nice enough fella, but he's not my nice fella, if that makes sense. I just find I really don't need to be around people like that. So these are the sort of things that we've got to be mindful of. I remember meeting with a group of ladies, and it was when we first started, it was all about business, and it was really good. I really enjoyed it. And then towards the end, I started every time I'd come away from so we'd meet for morning tea and discuss our business. Every time I came away from them for the next, like I would be in tears. I'd be so exhausted and everything else. And then I worked it out. One of the ladies was actually draining our energy and she was draining it every time. So I'd feel exhausted. And when I'm tired and I'm exhausted, it comes out in tears. It always comes out in tears for me. So it's just blah, 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 a blubbering mess. So I needed to be more aware during the situation. And this particular time when I'm sitting in my car in tears thinking, what the hell am I doing? This was my check-in. What the hell am I doing? Started looking for patterns. All right, I'm being drained of energy, and I don't know why and how, but I'm being drained of energy. So the next week when we met up, I was really more aware of it. And this is where I tried this emotional check-in tool. How do I feel in my body right now? So every time one of them would speak, there was four of us in the group. Any one of the three, would they speak? I would go, how am I feeling about what she's saying? Or, what's going on? How am I feeling about this person? How am I feeling about that person? And I could work out which one made me drop. So when her voice came in and my energy dropped, I knew what it was about. I got the understanding of it. And this is how I could find out what that check-in was. So this was this like a introverted burnout I used to have. So it really made me get that understanding of that check-in. So when again, looking back at the patterns, because I had to go back and go, well, the last couple of weeks, why have I been upset when I finished? What's going on? I looked at the patterns. And then when I understood that there was something happening, then I could do the emotional check-in tool while I was actually in the meeting. So that was really good. Now, why that works is because trusting others starts with trusting how you feel after you be with them, after you've been with them. So this particular lady that was draining all my energy, it's not like I didn't trust her, but I was then well aware of what she was doing. Whether she was aware of it or not, I don't know. She may not have been aware of it because sometimes you aren't. But then what I had to do was start putting up some protection, and I actually went and spoke to her, and I sort of said, look, this is how I'm experiencing, this is what I'm feeling. She didn't like that. She did take offense to it, and it didn't go down too well. But again, that's what I was experiencing, and I probably won't do that again. I tried to do the right thing, but it backfired. But it made me realize too, when we're looking about trusting others and how you feel with them, if she's not prepared to take on how I was feeling and what I was experiencing, and can she change how she is, or can she do something about it? She wasn't prepared to do any of that. It was like, nah, that's your problem, not mine. And she sort of went on the attack rather than sort of absorb it and have a look. That was a big lesson for me. So, but anyway, the third part. So again, watch how you're feeling. The third part is giving yourself permission to pause. This one is one that I've really pushed hard. I've got a really good aha moment about this, and this was really a good learning aspect for me. And I've now helped my partner because his ex was very much an emotional manipulator, and so she would demand an answer. Well, tell me, tell me, tell me, tell me. But this is about giving yourself permission to pause. So, not everyone deserves your trust straight away, and that's okay. You're allowed to take your time to say, let's wait and see. It's that pause that you need to do. Now, I'll give you this example again before I do the try this. My partner's uh, ex, she would demand, well, are you going to do it? Are you not? Are you going to do it? Are you going to do it? Are you going to do it? And she would just hound him. And I said to him, just tell her that you don't know yet. You need to think about it and you'll get back to her. That permission to pause. And he goes, oh no, she wants to know straight away. I said, I don't care what she wants to know. This is about you. What do you want to do? And he goes, well, I don't know whether I want to do it or not. And I said, okay, so you need time to think about it. You need to pause. Tell her that you need to pause. You need time to think about it. You will get back to her. I said, it just gives you breathing space. And that's what he started to do. And then and of course, she didn't like that. And she started to push back on it. And he said, I'm sorry, I can't give you an answer. I will give it to you as soon as I know. So he gave himself permission to pause. And then he was in control of his life. He was in control of his answers. He was in control of who he wants to trust and who he doesn't want to trust. He needed to have that time to be able to connect with himself. So try this. Instead of rushing to decide if someone's trustworthy, Give yourself permission to observe. Set a boundary around that emotional oversharing early on. Let your heart open in stages, not all at once. And tell yourself, trust is earned, not assumed. Okay. Now, I know that once you get through this trust area, you will be able to pick and choose. You will know. And even if there's people that you feel like you don't trust, you don't have to dislike them. You just have to know that you can't trust them. And sometimes you can't trust people. As for example, my partner's son, we can't trust him because he's on drugs and he is not in full control of who he is and what he's doing. So we can't trust him. We don't dislike him. I don't like his behavior, but I like the person that I knew before he went on drugs. So there's areas of him that are really nice, but because he's now a drug addict at this stage, he is not to be trusted. And that's it. We can't trust him. And that's because he can't trust himself. And that's where we sort of really, really dig down into it. Because he can't trust himself, we can't trust him. Okay, so trust is earned, not assumed. So I've gave you that example. So again, with say you're meeting somebody with work and things like that. So an example of that is you might meet a lady. I met a lot. They want to help business coaches and da 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 da. I'm very wary of that. I know that there's a lot of shonkies out there, even in readings and stuff. There's a lot of shonkies out there. So the thing is, you don't want to dish it straight away unless you really don't feel comfortable. But the other thing is just get that slow reveal. So test and try and don't trust all straight up. Share small truths and see how they're received. If you feel like they're empowering you, then it's we can step a bit further forward and step towards them. But trust is not, it's built over time. And you're watching those patterns and how you're feeling. It's really, really important to do it in that way. So you can allow yourself that time to be able to trust somebody. And if somebody says, well, don't you trust me? that's one of those aspects where you go, well, I don't have to trust you. There's no rules to say I have to trust you. So unless you prove that you're trustworthy, I don't need to trust you. So give yourself that permission to pause. Okay. Now, why this works is because emotional safety grows when you stay in control of how you, when, of how you and when you open up. Okay. You stay in control of it all. And that's what's really important. So, again, those three areas that we're looking at to build that emotional trust is to look for patterns, not promises. So, it's not the words, it's what they're doing. Use the emotional check-in tool, and that is how you're feeling. And then give yourself permission to pause. You do not have to do it all at once. So those three areas there will help you to be able to trust again. Okay. Rebuilding emotional trust isn't about flipping switches. Just can't turn it on. It's about honoring your heart's wisdom and your right to protect. You do not have to become hard and guarded. You do not have to pretend. You just have to remember you get to choose who you deserve to hold in your heart. You get to decide who you trust, not anyone else. And the more you trust your emotional radar, the clearer it becomes, because trust isn't about trusting other people. Trust is about trusting yourself, trusting your feelings, trusting yourself, trusting what you're experiencing, and trusting that area. Because when someone has, say, an example of a relationship, when somebody has like had an affair or something, so you no longer trust people, you no longer trust them. Because they've done this to me, I no longer trust them. What you're actually feeling is that you don't trust yourself to choose the right person anymore. You don't trust yourself that you deserve that. You don't trust yourself. So this trust, emotional trust, is really more about you than it is about anyone else. So again, if you want to understand what your intuitive nature is, your stronger intuitive nature is, take the free quiz and discover whether you're a connector, a healer, a visionary, or a creator. Okay. The connector is the emotional, the healer is the physical, the visionary is the mental, and the creator is the spiritual. You have all of those areas. Again, we have all of them in us, but some areas are stronger than others. That's me for today. I hope you had a great day. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you in the very near future. So, thank you for listening, and I will say bye for now. Bye bye.